you. Okay, Councillor Philip Evans, we can start the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee, where we're attending remotely. My name is Philip Evans, and I'm chairing the meeting this afternoon. I can confirm that the committee officers carried out a sound check before the start, and I assume that everyone can hear me. Can I again welcome you to the meeting, which we are attending remotely because of the current circumstances. In addition to committee members, we also have officers with us who will be assisting us in our discussions, and together with members of the public who are making representation, who will be introduced at the appropriate time. Can I again remind you that the meeting is being recorded and will be available to view through the Council's website following the conclusion of the meeting. For those viewing the recording, the committee members are identified with an asterisk next to their name. If you do wish to speak, please use the raise hand function, and you can also use a chat facility, but please note that I may not be able to monitor this during the course of the meeting. All microphones will be muted. If you've indicated your intention to speak, you'll be invited to turn your microphone on. If you leave your device for any reason, please ensure you're muted and you turn your video off. If I could now move on to the agenda. Item 1 is apologies, Jane.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare the existence and nature of their declared personal interests. Item 3, there are no urgent items. Item 4, which is the substantive item this afternoon, is the opposed application for the grant of a premises licence in respect of the senior school campus at Rydal Penrose School in Coleman Bay. Now, the hearing procedure has been circulated. That's at pages 3 to 13 in your pack. I'm assuming that everybody's read this, or at least had sight of it. So if there are no questions on that, we'll move straight on to the report on the matter. And Mrs. Samantha Jones, I think you're presenting this afternoon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. The report is with regard to an opposed application for the grant of a premises licence for the senior school campus at Rydal Penrose School. The licensing authority has received an application to grant a premises licence submitted in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003. The subcommittee is required to determine the application, taking into account all the relevant facts and evidence. The subcommittee must have regard to the representations made and take such steps as are deemed appropriate to promote the licensing objectives. The subcommittee can today grant the application subject to the relevant mandatory conditions and conditions consistent with the operating schedule. They can modify the application and/or impose conditions to such an extent that the authority deems appropriate, or they can reject the application. On the 4th of August this year, the Licensing Authority received an application for the grant of a premises licence. This is set out in Appendix A along with a map of the premises also. Representations were received within the 28-day application period. Those representations deemed valid are set out in Appendix B and have engaged with the 4 licensing objectives. I can confirm that no representations have been received from any of the responsible authorities. At this time, I also note that the Memorial Hall on the main campus site already holds a premises licence for regulated entertainment only between 8 AM and 11 PM, and the authority confirms that we have never received any complaints in respect of this current licence. Following the representations made, the applicant has proposed a revision of their hours applied for, and these are in Appendix C, which can be seen on page 74. There is also a letter from the principal in Appendix D, which is a response to the representations made. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you for that, Mrs. Jones. Before we turn to the applicant's representative, Miss
Maria McLean.
Miss
I
Maria
believe.
Martin. Yeah, can I? There is an issue that I think we can dispose of at an early stage, because otherwise it may take up time during the course of the hearing. Mr. Brian Dewhurst submitted a representation fairly recently relating to various covenants, some of which go back to the 1860s. Now, I'll invite our solicitor, Mr. Richard Jarvis, to address this issue relating to covenants. Mr. Jarvis, if you would.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, really a point of clarification before we get into the hearing discussion. Restrictive covenants that apply to, there are restrictive covenants that apply to these premises, but for the purposes of the Licensing Act 2003 and any determination of a licensed premises application, they're not relevant. They are deemed to be a separate regime. Therefore, if anybody wanted to invoke or rely on a restrictive covenant, it is obviously a matter for the beneficiary of that restrictive covenant. And in this case, it is the Crochan company. It is not a matter for the determination of the licensing committee. So I just wanted to clarify that point from the outset.
Okay, I'm grateful for that, Mr. Jarvis. So we'll hand over to the applicant's representative if you want to talk us through the application, please.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Vashek, and I'm the executive principal of Rydal Penrose School. Can I just check, because we have a mic for four of us here, that everyone can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, right, thank you very much. Chair, if I may introduce, I have three colleagues with me. I have immediately to my left, Mr. Clive Wolfendale, who was a governor of the school and was until very recently a parent, and he serves as a member of the Governor's Resources Committee. And why that's relevant, it is that committee which has oversight of any of the activities that we're going to discuss today. Also, to my left, Miss Deborah Mckenna, who was also a governor of the school and a current parent. She is our safeguarding governor, but she also is a presiding justice in both the adult criminal and in the family court. And if there are any safeguarding issues, and safeguarding is something obviously we take very seriously, then Mrs. McKenna will be able to answer that. And lastly, Maria McLean, the person who made the application. If I may, Chair, if at any point any of my colleagues feel it's appropriate to interject, then to assist yourself and your colleagues in determining this matter, then that's what we will do. Can I just check that you have a copy of a document that we sent earlier today for the licensing hearing?
Yes, we had something just before.
Right.
Yes.
Well, I'm not going to. You can all read, and I'm not going to go through this too much. But I think our overview is that obviously we've been a presence in Coleman Bay, and a significant one, for 140 years. we are a major employer in the town, and this Rydal Penrose is a very highly respected school. But we have really strong links with our local community, which have been particularly strengthened over the last 2 or 3 years. Members might be aware that in 2018, the governors of the school decided to modernise the school significantly. In one way, that was to no longer continue as a boarding school, but to become a fully fledged day school. And secondly, to modernise the school in our staffing, because at that point we had lots of staff who were doing jobs in the school for which they didn't have the professional training. So very much now, teachers in the school teach, and we've brought professionals into HR, to finance, and to IT. And one of the areas which we wanted to professionalise was our links with the local community. Previously, we'd had 2 people who didn't have that experience. And so Maria McLean replaced those people during the summer. And she has extensive background, having come to us from Dillon's in Llandudno. So the background to this is to try to continue that modernisation of Rydal Penrose School. And we reached a significant milestone this summer when we ceased all boarding, and we now are a completely day school, and we have no boarders. So the context of this is that our overview was that we have at the moment 39 local groups and associations who regularly use our facilities. I've got a full list here. We haven't provided them to you, Chair, but we can do so. But they range from all sorts of things, from Slimming World to Morris Dancers, to the Coleman Rugby Club, Swim Conway, and Abergele Cricket Club, for instance. And we are really pleased that we are making our facilities available to these clubs. Charities that use our facilities do so either entirely free or at cost. And we also have supported a number of charities, which I'll come to later, who've used the sports facilities. You know, we have fabulous buildings, grade 2 listed buildings here, and we want to see them used for the local community, not just for the 170 days a year that the children are actually in school. The other significant thing which I'll mention for us is that any surpluses that we make on any of these activities, in addition to obviously our main function of educating children, that goes into providing places for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. We currently have 18 fully funded places to children from disadvantaged backgrounds, and that costs about £250,000 a year. And that's the main beneficiary of these, the main financial beneficiary of these activities. So as was mentioned by Sam earlier, we've had a license for what's the Memorial Hall. And for those of you who are not aware, that is on the edge of the campus in Queen's Drive for many years. And that's been used extensively by the school, but also by the local community. In fact, only on recent Saturday night, there was a classical music concert in there. And one of the things that we've done recently, that we're in the process of it, is reconverting the school's original chapel. The school's original chapel is on Philip Cochrane Avenue, and that had served as a dining hall and also as a library. And that's been reconverted with the support of the listed buildings planning authority back to its previous status. Now, when that reverts to a hall, a major reason that we wanted to apply for an extension to the existing license was to enable us to use that hall. It has lots of advantages over the Memorial Hall. Its access to the hall is from our quadrangle, and the only access to the quadrangle is from Lansdowne Road, where we have parking for about 50 vehicles. And so those were the various reasons why we made this application when we did. We have an event history, and I'm not going to go through that, but to give you an idea, Ms. McKinnell's fellow vice chair of governors, who herself was a pupil at the school, was married, and her wedding reception was in that hall in 1974.
That's Mrs. Watson.
Mrs. Watson.
You did say your fellow. I do apologise. I'm not that old. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councillor Evans. So we're aware of wedding receptions that took place as long ago as 1974. I have another member of staff, the registrar, again a former pupil who lived in Colwyn Bay all her life. She was married at St John's Church, and again her wedding reception was in the school, and she's been married for 34 years this year. So we're aware of a long-standing provision that predates the various applications that we're making now. We're also asked to host weddings. We've had 2 so far this year, and we've set a maximum of 5 a year for that. They tend to take place in the summer. They can't take place in term time because often we're using the various activities on Saturdays ourselves, and we're in school for 35 weeks a year. And they tend to be either members of staff or former pupils of the school. And I also mentioned there the hospices, the local charities which we have supported and which we continue to support. Most recently, before the pandemic, the Anti-Nerlin Trust and Ataxia UK, we had a dinner, and both those charities, we used our facilities completely free of charge. We have a planned event for St David's Hospice on St David's Day next year, providing, of course, that we're awarded a licence, and they are absolutely delighted for that. And we're also approached for what I call prestigious events, because we have a Grade 2 listed building and a really good school. So the Wales Rugby League Committee wanted to hold their annual dinner for the first time in North Wales in Colwyn Bay. So the licence applications that we make, and I understand that some residents might have been very disturbed about the broadness of it, is to just regularise and professionalise what we're already doing. That to do things that are in keeping with our charitable status and the ethos of the school. And again, if I can just clarify, if we ever let, and as I say, we have 39 groups there. If we ever let, the first thing we do is we carry out a review of the group, including, for example, appropriate DBS checks if there's any involvement with children. Our responses to the objections, I suppose, have come into 5 strands. Firstly, safeguarding and protection of children from harm. Safeguarding of our children and young persons is the highest priority in the school, and I think every parent of a child here would confirm that. We have not 1, but 6 staff who are fully trained as safeguarding leads. And of course, we are overseen by Miss McKinnell, who, as I mentioned, is a presiding justice and has great experience in safeguarding. So I think that, you know, protecting children from harm is really important to us. In terms of the timing, then, as we've said to our neighbours, you know, we've suggested that, we've reviewed our application so that entertainment and alcohol service would have to finish at midnight. Concerns about noise in areas. I think that we've already had various practices in place about the departure of guests. I myself tend to attend lots of these events inevitably, and we've proposed another couple of things that might mitigate the concerns of our neighbours. One being a noise monitoring device, which we can install in the locations. And secondly, that in the event that a neighbour was concerned, a hotline telephone number will be provided to local residents during any licensed events. The idea is that the member of staff on duty would have a mobile phone, and if any resident was concerned that there was noise or nuisance or anything like that, they wouldn't have to wait. They could immediately phone the school and it could be dealt with. In terms of parking, we do have extensive parking, particularly in the quadrangle, which is out of sight, of course, of most people. And there's about 50 places, but we've got at least another 50 places. And lastly, in terms of monitoring thereafter, should the committee agree to grant this license, that we want to be open and transparent. We have already said that we will organise an open morning for local residents on the 21st of October, Chair, at 11 AM in school. We've chosen that date because it's during the half-term holidays, and therefore we don't, again, it's easier for us to have people in school, not just for safeguarding reasons, but also because of the COVID situation. And again, in terms of monitoring what actually goes on, in addition to the two governors that you've met with their experience, the Resources Committee is chaired by Mr. Jeremy Salisbury, who himself is a local resident to the school. So I think that concludes everything that we want to say. It is laid down, and I at some point happy to try and answer any questions that yourself might have, Chair, or any of your colleagues. I don't know whether any of my colleagues need to add anything. Sorry?
No, not at this stage. Then.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you for that, Mr. Weswick. It's now the opportunity for any objectors to ask any questions of the applicant. So if anybody has any questions at this stage, if they'd like to indicate, and we'll do the necessary. I don't seem to have anyone at this stage. No.
Sorry, I didn't realise how to raise a hand on the Zoom meeting. If it's okay, I'd like to raise a question just with regards to the frequency, because at the moment there are certain publications shared by Rydal Penrose School outlining the proposal for up to, well, to get in touch with regards to the number of free weekends that are available to book weddings. And in the application, it doesn't seem to reference any sort of frequency other than these alternative sources of information, which are outlining a higher frequency to these events than what is currently undertaken by Rydal Penrose at the moment. And I was wondering whether you could provide some further narrative as to, within the business plan, how many events you're expecting or anticipating.
Yeah, I think it is actually in the papers today. We're anticipating no more than 5 a year. And the window, clearly, we wouldn't want to have, we prefer not to have a wedding in school during term time. And therefore the only window, if I can describe it that way, is either the May half term or the summer holidays. And that's it. So we're looking at a maximum of 5 per year. We've had 2 so far this year. Obviously, it's determined by whether people approach us to be married here. But that's really when we talk about windows, that's the period that we're talking about. You know, these various activities, and Maria is aware of this, these various activities have to, must not in any way get in the way of what we're doing with the children. That's our overriding priority. Even things like the renting of our swimming pool only takes place at times when when Rydal Penrose children aren't using the pool. So but it is 5, that's our anticipation, and it is in writing in this document, 5 per year, basically around, I suppose, July, August and late May.
Understood.
And as John says, we would never interfere. No external hire or community group will be able to use the facilities to the detriment of the Rydal Penrose children. So actually in the summer, we'll have our pre-season rugby training, for example, that comes in at the end of August. So that's one weekend that we again can't use. So I wouldn't anticipate any more than 5 additional weddings next year.
I also mention, just to clarify, we're also approached for funerals. And they are typically either, you know, alumni or sadly maybe grandparents or parents. They don't usually involve a license application because clearly they often take place during the school day. And for safeguarding reasons, it's not possible to actually make that provision during term time. And so I mention funerals simply to give you to try to explain why we don't want activities which get in the way of what we're trying to do with the children.
Okay, understood. And one more with regards to the number. Again, you've sort of advertised through the weekly newsletters the events up to 250 people, and whilst you sort of can't guarantee what sort of numbers will be present, is there any sort of guidelines in terms of the actual number of attendees that you're looking to cater for in these sort of events?
Yeah, I'll try and the 250 is, we believe, will be the capacity of the Osborne Hall once the work is complete. I mean, clearly we'd need to speak once that work is to the fire officer, to make sure that the fire officer, I think the sorts of events that we're anticipating for the Osborne Hall, which is just behind me, and which is the facility which is furthest away from any residents, was pretty much in response to what I call corporate dinners, as opposed to weddings. So the Wales Rugby League annual dinner, for instance, for that might be, but until, as I say, until that work is complete, we don't know until we've spoken to the.
No, and I think in my experience, Mr. Winfield, the likelihood of having weddings for 250 people these days are fairly slim. They're expensive things, you know, and the space in the hall is wonderful, as John says, for a corporate dinner, maybe with a speaker. But the likelihood of having a wedding for that many people, I think, is fairly slim. And certainly in the recent past at Rydal, they've been for somewhere around 100, 150 people each time.
And I would also say, of course, that the people who approach us for weddings tend to be people who have a close link with the school, yes. Either members of staff or former members of staff or former pupils.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no, Mr. Dewhurst, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation on the 21st of October. I wonder why the school didn't try to engage with your neighbours prior to putting the application in. Your application was asking for carte blanche to do whatever you wanted from 0 to 0. We understand that maybe you were surprised that you did have some objections, and as a recourse, you've reduced the hours. But surely it would have been better to have engaged with us prior to putting out the document to the council.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah.
I think, if I may, Mr. Dewhurst, I'm Clive Wolfendale speaking, a member of the Board of Governors. I think probably the school was surprised by some of the reaction, probably because of the long history here and the happy relationship between the school and its neighbours. Perhaps that was taken for granted. Rest assured, the message received, and that is no longer the case. I'm here today with my colleague from the board because of our responsibility to ensure a number of things on behalf of the school. First of all, of course, that it's providing a proper educational experience in a safe way. Secondly, that it is being run on sound financial grounds and therefore can prosper for the future. But as importantly, I think that the school can continue to be a beacon of excellence in this area in Colwyn Bay. We all know what an incredible campus it is and how it sets the scene for this particular area. And the board is absolutely keen, certain, and determined that will not change, and that it will continue to enjoy the esteem and respect of everybody. So the opportunities that are now available in terms of coming into the school on the 21st, and the opportunity for regular meetings and the hotline is something that I hope residents will regard as a safety net. What I can assure you on behalf of the governors is that we will monitor this situation very carefully on behalf of the school and on behalf of residents. And if anything is not as it should be, that will be put right. I think that these are important matters. But ultimately, the school wishes to continue. It's on a very positive trajectory at the moment. As Mr. Bashek has amply described, it is both fulfilling its mission to provide first-class education, but also spreading those opportunities in a much wider way to the local community. And we see this very much part of that journey, but only if it is done in a way which accords with the traditions of the school and the harmonious relationship with the residents. And I just wanted to make those points, Mr. Dewhurst, in response to your question, which we fully understand and appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfenden. I am a bit surprised, really, to see you at this meeting, as you are a councillor. Would this not be a conflict of interest for you?
I'm not a councillor, I'm not a councillor, Mr. Dewhurst. I'm vested very much in this area in a business and personal sense, but I'm not a local councillor. Okay, I understood you were on the looking at compliance in the council. Is that not correct? It is, but I'm not an elected councillor. That's a separate responsibility and reflects no conflict in this matter whatsoever, from my point of view. Thank you. You mentioned the hotline number. This would be a great advantage. When I tried to get in contact with the school in July and August of this year, nobody was answering the phones, either the junior school or the senior school. So that would be a good advantage.
Okay, I've got Angela Vickers.
Yeah.
Miss Vickers, please.
Hello. My question is if you envisage only holding 5 weddings per year and you've already held 2, why are you having a wedding fair on October the 24th and your suppliers are promoting that actively on social media?
I think a wedding fair is a very different sort of thing. A wedding fair is an opportunity for those who organise weddings throughout North Wales to come together. That's a wedding fair doesn't mean weddings here. Maria can probably explain a little bit better than I can.
I mean, to clarify, we have absolutely no weddings booked next year. So from the wedding fair, I'd like to welcome some of our current parents who haven't seen the venue. It will be a chance for us to look at the Osborne Hall in greater detail. But as John says, the suppliers there, it's about working with the community and local businesses and all working together to promote a set of services. Now, I think we'd all be very happy if people that came to the wedding fair booked, say, the florist, but didn't particularly book the wedding here. It's about benefiting everybody on that day, not just Rydal Penrose.
Okay, it actually does say new wedding venue in Colwyn Bay. Whoop whoop, come to the open day.
And we are a new wedding venue as such, because the Osborne Hall hasn't been used for weddings in how many years, John?
I think the Osborne Hall has not been used for weddings since 1999.
It just, as I say, I received the letter when I put my representation in, and you're very much going down the line of it's just for pupils and people connected to the school. Yet we pick up a copy of the North Wales magazine in Rydal and find a 2-page spread advertising what you're going to be doing, and then the next thing, a wedding fair. So it sort of just sounds a little bit disingenuous from my point of view, that it's very much for the school and for pupils of the school and parents of the school, yet you do seem to be advertising this as a commercial enterprise. So if you could just clear that up for me, that'd be lovely.
Thank you, Mrs. Vickers. Pronoun Dara, everybody.
It's Miss, actually, but yeah.
I'm sorry, Miss. Thank you. I do apologise. So pronoun Dara, Deborah Mckenna speaking. Just to clarify, my understanding of what our principal, Mr. Bashak, said, the people who would be predominantly interested would be maybe ex-pupils. It's not solely for those. It's just that's where most of the business may come from, even though it's only 5 weddings that we're anticipating. So we're not excluding the local community at all. In fact, we're keen to engage in anybody who would like to get married in our church. And we've got the most beautiful, beautiful buildings here. So it's not solely for Rydal Penrose, it is for the community as well. We just think that at the moment it will be ex-pupils, but we'll see how it goes. I hope that clarifies that for you.
Yeah. Well, coupled with the sort of never-ending license and your 24-hour a day, 7 days a week wrestling, boxing, wedding thing, and the advertising, it does sort of, for everybody in the area, suggest that this is a little bit bigger than you're saying at the moment.
Yeah, Ms. Vickers, so that part of the application's been withdrawn, so I don't think we need to deal with the hours. The hours are as amended,
midnight,
not
yeah,
24 hours.
But it's every day.
Okay. I've got Ms. Frances Nye is wanting to speak.
Yes, thank you. We have enjoyed 2 weddings on the site of St John's Church. The 3rd wedding for our daughter had to be held in Llandudno. I presume people know that you cannot have a Christian wedding in a church which has no congregation. The other thing I'd like to say is that when we had our first daughter's wedding, we did have a reception at Rydal, but we were told by Rydal that we must stop all music at 10:30 and that we should clear the site by 11 for the sake of the people living in the locality. Yeah, that's all I want to say, really. Those 2 points. One is, are people aware they can't have a Christian ceremony in a church which doesn't have a congregation? And also that in the past 13 years ago, we were told we had to finish at 10:30 all music and at 12. I say this partly because I do live in the vicinity and I have heard the music of functions that have been held on Rydal site very loudly up till 12 o'clock.
May I address your first point about the church? We had a wedding there on the 18th of September where a member of staff was married by our chaplain. So I'm slightly confused as to why you say you can't have a Christian ceremony. It may be that going back 13 years
Can I just say that
I think there might be a little bit of confusion. I think it relates to, if you like, the statutory position of the Anglican Church. You couldn't have an Anglican wedding where there is no congregation. That's the issue.
We did have two Christian weddings. Sorry.
This is a bit of a side issue, actually, isn't it? Really?
Well, sorry, can I just say we did have a Christian wedding for the first two weddings, but we were told by the Methodists that we could not hold the one 5 years ago at St John's because it was not an active congregation. That was told us only 5 years ago. So that might need to be checked out legally. Maybe it's different in Wales, but that was told us.
You could still have a wedding there if it's licensed and if the wedding is conducted by a registrar, yeah.
Mr. Evans, thank you, we're grateful.
Maybe it needs checking.
Right, Jan Roberts, please.
Hello, I'm so sorry, I need to apologise because I haven't been able to attend the meeting from the beginning. So I haven't heard everybody's points raised, but I'm an essential worker and I'm needed at work, and to be honest I can't even spare this time, I'm that busy. So apologies if I'm repeating what other neighbours have said, but I'm utterly sorry.
Miss Roberts, can I just pause you for a second? The bit we're on now is actually to ask the Rydal representatives any questions you might have on the application. It's not at this stage that you would make your formal objection.
No, okay. So thank you. Yeah, so my questions are how anyone would imagine it acceptable to send a very recent letter offering neighbours to look around the premises. Why would that be seen to mitigate conservation concerns?
Chair, I'm struggling with that. Clearly, as Mr. Wolfendale said in response to the question to Mr. Dewhurst, one of the things that was recommended is that we look at giving our neighbours the opportunity to meet with us on a regular basis. We've suggested a termly basis, and that's what was thought a good thing to do, and so that's what we've done, and it's as straightforward as that, really. And the impression I've had is that most of our neighbours see that as us trying to be reasonable and transparent and open.
Yeah, as transparent as possible.
Well, transparent is not something that you have displayed in many a month, and I think truly transparency is something that you really need to look into your systems, and particularly the new setup that you've got with your commercial lead. I think transparency is something that you need to recognise you are not.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roberts. Deborah Mckenna speaking. Sorry, I'll just look to the chair, Mr. Evans. Mr. Evans, I would be asking at this stage for Ms. Roberts to evidence this. We're hearing accusations as opposed to evidence, and that's nothing against you, Ms. Roberts, but would you like to go off-piste, as it were, in that direction at the moment? Because if we're being accused of not being transparent in the last couple of months, we need to know why, because we're sitting here a bit of aghast at the moment.
Well, I think you've already accepted that you haven't been transparent, because we've had a letter only a couple of days ago saying that it has become clear that you need to keep your neighbours better informed. So what led you to that conclusion? is my question.
Yeah, if I may, Ms. Roberts, but I don't know if you heard my response previously to the point Mr. Dewhurst made, which was perfectly reasonable, was that I think it is fair to say that the school was somewhat taken by surprise by some of the feelings locally in terms of the application, and have reflected on that, which is why the invitation to come into the school and to participate in regular meetings and so on has been offered. And on behalf of the governors, I'm sure Ms. McLean would be willing to meet you personally to go through with you in as much detail as you require what the plans are here, backing up this application. So I hope that makes some sort of sense. The board, as I repeat again, desperately want to be good neighbours in this part of Coleman Bay, and have urged staff at all levels to engage with local residents to explain exactly what's going on, because we do firmly believe it's in the interest not just of the school but of the locality, and to preserve this fine area and fine tradition. So I hope you will be able to take up that opportunity, and at any stage ask questions that you feel are a concern.
Okay. Does that conclude that questioning? I haven't got anybody else indicating that they want to ask anything. So, Councillor Ken Stevens, I think Mr. Dewhurst before I bring Councillor.
Can I just ask one question? Why the school wants to hold events inside and outside? Surely there'd be less impact on the neighbours if the events were only held inside, particularly with Merton Place just across the road, which is a nursing home, not a care home, a nursing home, where there's people in there with end-of-life conditions.
I agree with you completely, Mr. Dewhurst, and clearly that's a consideration, and it's why the Osborne Hall comes so into play, because the external areas for the Osborne Hall are a quadrangle, so they are enclosed within all the school buildings. So when we say they're outside, they are outside, but they are bordered on all four sides by a school building.
I mean, people that live in the Puthcrocken conservation area understand it. It's quite a unique place acoustically. A noise carries around this area quite amazingly. I think it bounces off the trees in the Puthcrocken woods at the back. Sunday I was out cutting my hedge and I could hear people talking down near the swimming pool. It's a very, very strange phenomenon, and so any noise that is made is carried quite extensively through the area.
If I can, I think those of you that know the ambiance of the school will be aware of the area that we're talking about. It is an area that's bounded on all four sides. It is a quadrangle. It's bounded on all four sides by buildings, and I think that's the outside area that we have in mind. And if it means that the plan is redrawn to identify that area, we have an extremely good and strong and supportive relationship with the nursing home that you've just described. It's just across the road from me, and that's something that we're very conscious of.
Our children go to sing there at Christmas, and we do events for them, and the children will go over and say hello. So we're quite strongly tied with them, and one would hope that they would come to us straight away if there was a problem. But I know when the children go to sing and we've taken different instruments over, they've engaged with us and enjoyed it, to be honest. They like the sound of music. I'm not saying they may like it at 10 o'clock at night. We need to keep it, it's a quadrangle, but they do enjoy the children going over.
Right. Ms. John Roberts, did you want to ask something else?
Yes.
or-
Have you actually written to the 2 nursing homes that are closest to the school? Have you actually written to them directly and asked what their opinion is about the noise levels at the moment?
We followed due process along with the licensing authorities' recommendations. The notices have gone up. We've been open and honest with everybody. They've been on everybody's school gate. I often see their care workers coming in and out, looking at the notices for both opposite here and the care home down on the corner. So no, I would be very honest and say we haven't written directly to them, but we didn't write directly to anybody in this instance. We followed due process.
I think it's really important that we follow due process, that we treat all our neighbours identically. Otherwise, we risk the charge of giving preferential information or preferential treatment to some people and not to others. If I can just clarify one thing, though, the invitation to the meetings in October have obviously been sent to all our neighbours, including to those particular homes.
Yes.
And in fact, for those homes, we provided more than one copy because there are, of course, a number of residents.
Yes,
Okay.
but thank you. But you've in all that time, you've just clarified, no, you didn't actually write out to the management of those nursing homes or the trustees of those nursing homes to point out that the level of noise and disturbance and traffic and litter will be increasing if your proposals go ahead. So those bodies have not had a chance to object fully.
Forgive, sorry, Clive Wolfen earlier. I mean, I think the school wouldn't necessarily accept that your proposition is accurate. In fact, it's desperate to avoid that situation. But as you've heard, there has been engagement in different ways with the nursing homes as well as everybody else in the area, and that will continue. Just while I've got a second, can I just make a point about the weddings and some alarm about the wedding fair and so on. I work with a couple of other charities which offer wedding facilities in very special parts of North Wales. And of course, it's an extremely expensive and long-term proposition. So a wedding fair which takes place in October will typically be looking at a wedding taking place in 2023, 2024, such as the lead time for these events. So, you know, I think there could be some reassurance that a wedding fair held in October is not going to precipitate in a spate of weddings early in the new year. That just isn't how it works normally. These things take, as I'm sure we're all aware, from one way or another, a lot of planning.
Despite the fact that you've advertised to people that you have availability for next year, you don't expect that offer to be taken up?
Well, it may or may not. I'm just pointing out that
it may or may not. Yeah.
Long plan, and we've already discussed the limit with the proposal on the limit for the number of weddings, which is suggested.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be, Ms. Roberts, that you were not present when I was asked this question, but we made it clear that the maximum number of weddings we envisage is 5 per year, and that the timing of those would be outside term time and would be in the summer.
So what on that level of events, why do you not feel that you can continue to make an application as and when necessary? If you're making an application as it stands, that it does not limit your weddings to 5 a year. So your application is incorrect then, do you agree?
No, I don't agree at all, because we're not just talking about weddings, we're talking about school events. You know, if we have youngsters putting on a performance of Matilda the end of November, that performance will be available for a member of the public to come to. So we have to cover those sort of events too.
Sorry, and we also have Christmas carols and Christmas services in the Memhall. And in fact, I refer back to the nursing homes that you mentioned, Miss Roberts. we send minibuses over and we bring their residents and staff to our concerts.
You don't need an increased license to do that, do you? You don't need an alcohol license or a late night license for those activities, do you?
We served mulled wine, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you were here when John spoke about corporate dinners as well, Ms. Roberts. So we've been approached by the Welsh Rugby League, who a very prestigious event would be held for the first time in North Wales, I would suggest. Normally held in South Wales, you know, supporting local community, bringing people to use local hotels.
Clarence is committed.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Right. I've got Councillor Ken Stevens. You've been very patient.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. My question to the applicant is regarding the letter of the 27th of August, actually. You say the service of alcohol will be ending at midnight, which is fair enough. What percentage of time would you give for a drinking up time? And then basically what time would you envisage the guests leaving the premises? Now, you say in your letter, we always deploy members of staff to direct guests as they arrive. What proposals do you have for guests who are leaving, possibly at 1:15, 1:30 in the morning? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, it's a very good question. Thank you, Councillor Stevens, for posing that. I would suggest that custom and practice would have, shall we say, last orders. I'm old enough to remember that. Called it around 11:30 with the drinking up time of say 15 minutes. So people would be leaving at 1:45 and hopefully clear by midnight. Certainly recent events at the school would bear that out. And actually we were clear before that. I don't envisage people leaving, Councillor Stevens, at 1 a.m. And I think that would be in any detriment that we have with the relationship with our neighbours at this point. I can evidence the wedding that we had in the summer, where we were actually all left site and the site was quiet by 1:45. Music was turned off at about 11:15. The recent Rydal Penrose dinner, where two of my colleagues were present, where we were finished by 11:30. And in terms of people leaving, yes, slightly misrepresented there, arriving and leaving. We always monitor people arriving and leaving.
And it was so guests leaving the premises would be encouraged to be quiet and et cetera, yes.
Oh, absolutely, and certainly in a briefing with any of the organisers and any of our team, they're all very clearly briefed that that's of paramount importance.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I just add, Councillor, that probably the majority of those events will actually involve parents and staff at the school. So obviously for staff, there's an expectation about the way staff behave from me, but we tend to find, I don't think there's an event where we've had a temporary event notice which has not ended before the time in which the notice expired.
Interestingly, though, the wedding that we referred to for 1988 had a temporary event notice with alcohol service going on till 1 a.m. So there is history of later hours at the school.
I think, sorry, Councillor Deborah Mckenna, I think from my point of view, I'm very keen that if we are granted this license, that we don't damage our own reputation, because we are a school. That's what we are. We are a Methodist school. That's what, you know, and I certainly don't want us to put ourselves in a position where we're damaging our own reputation by having lots of people running around at midnight shouting and screaming. I mean, I would be absolutely horrified as a governor if that was the case. We've got children that we teach here, and we're very proud of that. We've been through some difficult times recently, but you know, we're back on top now and numbers are increasing, so we will not put ourselves in a position where our reputation is damaged from a point of the school, you know, from an education purpose.
Can I just come back there, because I'm somewhat confused. So the serving of alcohol will finish before midnight, is that what you're saying?
Yes, I would generally think we would call last orders at 11:30 so that we're all finished. You know, people have had the chance to buy the last drink and drink up by midnight. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Councillor Bob Squire.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first of all say hello to Mr. Wolfendale, because we tend to go back some years. How are you, Clive?
Very well, Mr. Squire.
Good, good.
It's good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah. The one thing that I'm surprised about by the objectors is that no mention has been made of what to me seems to be a predominant issue, which caused a lot of them some problems, and that was relating to noise, and eventually led to a request for numbers to be limited at functions, etc. Could you explain a bit about that, please? Because this has led equally, I think, when you look at the letters of objection, to what is alleged a fear of creating a nightclub environment. And obviously, a lot of what you've said, I think, has allayed those fears. But I would still be interested to know what you feel about the incident where there were a lot of people making a noise and allegedly creating antisocial behaviour. Seems to me that it was odd, and I was really wanting you to say that maybe that will not happen again.
I think, Councillor Squire, I think the incident that you referred to was not a licensing issue at all. I think during the summer holidays, we had a group of children from the inner city who hadn't been out of their inner city for 18 months, who came to Coleman Bay on holiday. And on arrival here, unfortunately, some of those 15-year-olds behaved, unfortunately, sometimes as groups of 15-year-olds sadly do. So that incident was dealt with, and I think, you know, we would not condone that behaviour, but at the same time, our response would be proportionate, bearing in mind, as I say, that these were 15-year-olds who had not been out of an inner city and came to the seaside for the first time. So the incident that you're referring to was not related to an alcohol license or a public entertainment license. It was a group of holiday makers.
Right, thank you. I welcome the comments that you made, obviously, about the use of noise monitoring device, because that is a significant issue in the objections. So I welcome that, and I also welcome the fact that the school has technicians which set up and operate sound systems, etc. So they were reassuring. Really that was the questions I wanted to ask. I've forgotten the other point, but I'll come back if I can remember what it was. But thank you anyway.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bob. If you remember what it was, please let me know. Right. So it's now open to the to any of the objectors who wish to make their observations, if you like, a statement in support of their objections. So if anybody wants to indicate or press the button showing the raised hand, we can make a start on that part of the proceedings. Jan Roberts.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I've been a neighbour of the school for over 20 years, and I have never complained about any of the parties or the weddings or social events ever. I haven't complained about the car noise or the parking issues. I've never complained about the litter, because my reaction is proportionate, and for the sake of good relationships and for the sake of a peaceful life, I have never complained to Rydal about anything ever. But I'm somewhat astounded by the lack of judgment in this licensing application, and the naivety that if you stop selling alcohol at 12 o'clock, that the whole of the area will have cleared in 15 minutes or a reasonable amount of time. The feeling that it won't cause parking issues or vehicles being left outside our properties, that it won't affect elderly and vulnerable people that are immediately located next to the school. I feel that the lack of transparency is appalling. I feel that the attitude of trying to persuade neighbours is shocking.
Can I just clarify, when you refer to lack of transparency, do you mean lack of consultation or prior consultation?
Yes,
okay.
Lack of prior consultation, and then in reply, the correspondence that we've had in reply suggests that our concerns regarding wildlife, conservation, litter, noise, vulnerable people might be affected by the view that we need to look closer at the buildings, and we need to be more familiar with the school itself. And that can't possibly be the case, can it? So really, I'm not only am I insulted and astounded by the professional capacity of the new commercial section of that school, I'm bitterly disappointed as a neighbour. And I can only hope that the council will be consistent in their approach to conservation, which has always been that this is a special area of interest and it's a highly valued conservation area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Roberts. Anybody else? Mr. Dewhurst.
I've only lived in the area a very short period of time. We moved here the week before lockdown in 2020. I had a couple of interactions with Rydal School during that time, and they were always very pleasant. Unfortunately, the incident that the headmaster has referred to in July and August with the inner city children coming to the seaside was in fact a very large group of people, far in excess of what he said was in the newspaper article, where he virtually called me an anti-Semite, which I find very strange, considering I'm a compliance manager globally for a company that has 140,000 employees in every country in the world. He knows nothing about me or what I do, yet he made, instead of coming back to me like he did to other people whose replies I've seen, he decided to have a newspaper interview about it. I was very disappointed about that. As I said earlier, I applaud the idea of having a contact telephone. The two numbers that I had prior, the senior school and the junior school, when I wanted to complain about the illegal activities of these inner city children riding a rough terrain vehicle up and down Puthacrocken Avenue with gay abandon and then playing football until midnight with about 30 aside, there was nobody to call, nobody to answer the calls. Eventually, I reported the incident to the police. They acted on it, and then Maria McLean contacted me after I sent an email to the clerk to the governors. Now, the control of that group was abysmal, absolutely. There was litter everywhere, the noise, the shining lights into people's windows at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's just unbelievable of these very high-spirited youngsters. By the way, there were adults there as well. In fact, they went out a number of times in 3 75-seater coaches. So how there was only 110 of them, I've got no idea, because there's about 450 just on the coaches alone. With the 2 evenings, boys one night, men the next night, wives, children. It was a very, very large group of people. I'm only raising this because it's an indication of the total lack of control that Rydal School had over their guests, tenants. How would you describe them? This group was staying in all of the properties that Rydal owned, not just in Puthcrocken, which holds 110 apparently. By the way, there were materials for building new beds going backwards and forwards, and that rough terrain vehicle was up and down Puthcrocken Avenue for 2 weeks solid. So if they couldn't control that group, and this happened shortly after Maria McLean joined Rydal School in June of this year, end of July, this group came. It was a very, very poor show. Traffic, yeah, we first moved here. We know we're opposite a school. We know adults drop the kids off at school. We had to paint a white line across our driveway to stop the adults, the parents, parking in front of our driveway. By the way, they still do that anyway, some of them, but not all anymore. Public safety. We were very surprised that the summer school, where there were very, very young children, I don't know what the lower age was, maybe 3, maybe 4, were being dropped off in the middle of this massive group of visitors to the seaside. And I can't say that their public safety was completely covered. There was nobody monitoring what was happening outside of the school gates. Yeah, anything could have happened, especially with that rough terrain vehicle being driven manically up and down the avenue. As a public nuisance, the amount of littering was just unbelievable. Empty drinks bottles, used tissues, you know, playing football on the road. It was a total nightmare. We had guests staying here that had an early ferry from Liverpool going back to Belfast. They didn't get a wink of sleep all night from all the going on that was happening. The covenants, okay, I understand that councils don't like covenants. It's come up in planning. They don't respect them. But this place, this conservation area, this lovely area where we all live now, is only here because of the covenants. They predate planning. And if there's no respect for the covenants, well, then the place is lost. Finally, I will say that my wife's grandparents were Wesleyan Methodists from Monera near Wrexham. They would be rotating in their graves to know that alcohol was being sold in a Methodist school and dancing as well. That is not the ethos of Methodism. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dewhurst. I've got Angela Vickers next, please.
Hello, yes, I'd just like to say that I haven't heard anything at all to sort of reassure me that weddings and events will be capped at 5 a year. And I would like to concur with what Jan Roberts said, that if you're having or planning on having that few weddings, what's wrong with the existing system. There is absolutely nothing to stop a wedding every single weekend if that's what they want to do, if this licence is granted. We've only got your word for it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Winfield?
Oh yeah, from my perspective, the start position is that there is an existing licence in place till 11:30. I acknowledge that there is a requirement for the school to hold events, but I think from my side, I think it's just disappointing that the narrative around the number of weddings has only come to light in this discussion and the prior submission that was made. If there had been a categoric sort of statement in terms of what the intent for the license was required, then that would have been far easier to understand, and an understanding that it's almost the status quo of events that are being held at the moment with additional events on top, such as these 5 weddings. Then that, through dialogue with the local neighbours and so on, would have been easier to understand, versus going for a 230 license, indicatively, you know, promoting the number of weddings that are going to be held without providing that narrative that the intention is to be capped. So to summarise, the communication from my perspective could be better, but everything that's been outlined from my view, that the number of weddings will be capped, and I take the school on their word that that will occur, and the events will be managed and closed out by 12. So my objections have been tempered by the discussion that's been held today. But again, you know, and everything the school's outlined, that they will engage with the neighbours. There will be safeguards in place in terms of contact names and noise monitoring. Then I am less inclined to object to the extension 3 till 12 on an ad hoc basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Winfield.
Francis I would like to speak, Chair.
Okay.
Just reiterating, really, out of the horse's mouth for our reception. My husband actually used to be a teacher at the school. That we should finish at 10:30 because of noise to the neighbours, and that we had to clear the site by 11. Now, we provided the alcohol ourselves, so we weren't mean, but people did drink, but there was no drunkenness at all. We had to be out by 11. We had to stop all proceedings, and people had to go from 10:30 to 11. I don't know what's changed, but that is what Rydal told us. It seems a very different story now, and noise is something which, as we've said, carries very, very clearly over the air at night. As a neighbour, I would say that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Knight. I don't seem to have anybody else. Have my colleagues any questions for any of the objectors that you've heard? No. Okay. Sorry, did somebody want to say something?
Chair, just on behalf of the school, if there's an opportunity just to make a statement, I'm sure the principal would, but if that's not feasible at this stage, then we understand.
There's a closing speech for you coming up in a short while.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, I've no questions myself from for anyone at this stage. Right, closing speeches now, if you like. Firstly, any of the objectors wish to make a closing speech? There's no need to rehearse anything that you've already said. If you want to summarise anything, that will be fine, but that's the position we're at now. We've heard quite fully from various parties in the matter, so if anybody does want to make a closing speech, perhaps you could indicate. No. So I'll pass on then, and it's open to the applicant to make a closing speech. And no doubt as part of this, you can address any of the comments that have been made by the objectors in their recent submissions. That might be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think the first thing I'd say is that we're aware that this is being videoed. We're also aware that everything that we put in writing is on the table. And for those who doubt our truthfulness, if I can describe it that way, I'm very, very happy for anything that we've said here today to be quoted back to me and to my colleagues, either in a month or 6 months or 12 months, and to be held to account for that. So that's the first thing I would say. Secondly, in relation to the matter of the children that came to the school during the summer, clearly, it is our wish that our work as a charity does not unduly affect in a detrimental way our neighbours. And clearly we review all our lettings, and we will continue to review all our lettings. And I think that, I wouldn't want to be woken up by 15-year-olds misbehaving at 11, 12 o'clock at night. And I therefore empathise with you, Mr. Dewhurst, for that. But I think you can take our guarantee, just as that, again, this is being videoed, that we review all our lettings and we take appropriate action beyond that. Other than that, I'm very grateful for everyone's concern. Clearly, we accept that we followed due process in carrying out this consultation exercise. I think we've learned a lesson on how we should better communicate with our neighbours. We wish we'd done that better before the notices went up. And I think I think both my governors have said it's something that we have to take on the chin, and we learn from that. But I think other than that, we stand by everything we've said and everything we've written. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Washik. So really that draws us to a conclusion now. Ordinarily, we would retire in private physically from the meeting room, and after a period of time, I can't tell you how long, we would re-emerge, and anyone who's still present, we would announce the decision to. Because of the difficult times we find ourselves in currently, that isn't really practical, because we don't know how long we will be discussing this. The 3 members of the subcommittee, I should have explained at the beginning, the subcommittee is sitting, if you like, as the licensing authority for the County Borough of Conway. So any decision we take is the decision of the licensing authority this afternoon, acting under delegated powers. So we will retire with our solicitor and our committee officer to make a note of what our discussion is. The decision will be issued in writing to the various parties, and that should take place within 5 days of today. So if there's no other procedural questions, then it falls to me just to thank you for your attendance this afternoon. Can I thank the applicant and the applicant's representatives for their contribution and explanations, and can I thank the people who've objected and made representations for their contributions and their assistance in us coming to a fairly, I won't say quick hearing, but I anticipated the hearing might have taken rather considerably longer given the various issues that had been raised. So thank you all for your cooperation in that. and we will endeavour to get the decision letter out within 5 days to you all. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.